Nietzsche on warriors and philosophy. It strikes me from the Nietzschean perspective that there are two types of philosophers. There are the mainstream of philosophers, the great well-known philosophers, the accepted philosophers, who are usually deriving their philosophy from the caste of priests, from the religion, from the saints and the theologians. A philosophy which is a lineal descendant from religion. Often these philosophers, as Nietzsche contends, are disguised theologians. Often they will feature God in their philosophy to plug the gaps in their philosophy, and sometimes they will use another word for God, but it's still God, a disguised God in their philosophy. They are indeed handmaidens of religion. But there are philosophers who are direct lineal descendants from the other caste, the warrior caste. Their philosophy derives from tactics, strategy on the battlefield, in combat, and in hunting. These philosophers could be warriors in retirement. They could be great planners, great fighters, who passed on their ideals and their ideas. And these ideas entered the realm of philosophy and were taken up by thinkers, who therefore disseminated the tradition of warrior philosophy. And so Nietzsche's philosophy must be seen to be in that stratum, deriving from the warrior caste. Now we know that Nietzsche himself, in his early 20s, was very keen to prove himself as a military man. Even though he had given up his Prussian citizenship in order to teach in Switzerland at Basel, and had to become, or decided to become, a Swiss national, therefore revoking his Prussian citizenship, he still wanted to serve in the Prussian army, and due to some connections with top military brass, was able to spend a year as an artilleryman and a horseman, and was very enthusiastic about it. But, as we know, he injured himself very badly. His injury to his chest, due to a riding accident, was nearly fatal. And no doubt that knocked back his military action. Ultimately, his eyesight was so bad that it really ruled him out as a soldier. Something of a regret at first, and maybe it remained a regret with him. But then he pursued those military ideals and disciplines and transformed them into philosophy. As we know, a few years later, in his later 20s, he spent a disastrous few months as a medical orderly, contracting dysentery and diphtheria, and was very ill once again. So the gods of war seemed to tell Nietzsche that he was not to be one found on the battlefield, but one to be found on the battlefield of ideas, of philosophy. And incidentally, the famous picture of him with a saber in uniform with the Prussian helm on the table, that very famous picture, which is often ridiculed, was actually meant as a joke. His sister tells us that it was a kind of vaudeville idea of Nietzsche's to send himself up. So we can put that to bed there and then. But if we go back to our thesis, that there is a philosophy deriving from the warrior caste, just as there is a philosophy deriving from the priestly caste, the three main castes, the three main Aryan castes, being, of course, the warrior, the priests, and the farmers, then we can see that Nietzsche is misinterpreted because he's often perceived as being of the priestly caste. He's often seen as being in that stream of philosophy, the stream of Kant, of Hegel. But in fact, he is much more in the stream of Machiavelli, much more in the stream of von Clausewitz, much more in the stream of Julius Caesar, of Sun Tzu, of the Hagakure, the Japanese samurai. His ideas and tenets and his mode of expression, we see the tendency to laconic phrasing, the link there to Sparta, the warrior nation. The brevity of his writing, particularly in something like The Twilight of the Idols. And there we contrast that to the very rich and very wordy writings of a Hegel, and the circumlocutions of a Kant or Spinoza. Nietzsche's writing is terse, concise, and yet poetic. Indeed, the best poetry is usually concise. And this leads me to look at different influences and a different atmosphere around Nietzschean philosophy. And while one must be aware of Kant and Schopenhauer, of course, as direct influences due to the culture of philosophy, one must also look very closely at that martial philosophy, those thinkers of tactics and strategy. And so that leads us to look at something, as already mentioned, like the Hagakure. And Mishima did a very useful version of the Hagakure. And in that slim book, and as they all are, like Machiavelli's The Prince, very slim books, like Nietzsche's Twilight of the Idols, they are slim, concise books. But in Mishima's version of the Hagakure, there are many Nietzschean ideas and Nietzschean echoes. And while I tend to be very critical of modernism and modern writers and modern ideas and modern popularity, as one should be, there was a recent, well, not so recent now, but maybe in the last couple of decades, a writer who came up with a couple of books which actually I find very useful in the ambit of Nietzschean studies. The first book was called Power, and the author is, of course, Robert Greene. I read this book when it came out simply because I was reading The Will to Power, and I was just interested to see what he had to say on it. And as you might be able to see, it's a book that I read and notated quite thoroughly. It's essentially a compilation of quotes from the kind of authors I'm talking about, those philosophers of the military school of life. And Robert Greene made these useful short compendiums. So these small, short, concise, abbreviated books actually go well towards our library of military school of life philosophy, alongside the Prince, alongside the Hagakure, alongside Twilight of the Idols. He wrote a second one, which I also devoured, called War. And likewise, I found the pocketbook, the concise version, very useful. He went on to write other books in a similar vein, but those are the two that served me the most. And while Nietzscheans are often accused of being snobby culturally, which again is right because we are talking about an aristocratic philosophy, it doesn't mean that we would decry all popular writers or thinkers. And another popular, almost pulp writer that I found very useful in this connection. And we might say that Robert Greene, the previous books I showed there of Power and War, is very much a strategist. These books are more tactical. And we might say the difference here is that in strategy, we're looking at the bigger plan from the generalship point of view. In tactics, we're looking at the details and therefore very much in the kind of ninja area of philosophy. And I found this writer, Dr. Can't even say his name, Lung, Dr. Lung. It's a name I haven't tried to say before. He's written many books. It's obviously some kind of pseudonym. Many of these books looking at the kind of philosophy of tactical ninjaism and so on and so forth. Many of the books he's written are virtually retreads of each other. But he has some very useful books like The Lost Arts of War, where he goes into various warrior ethics and draws a philosophy from them. And this writer, like Robert Greene, is also, of course, a Nietzschean. And something like this, mental dominance, well, this is what we're aiming at as Nietzscheans. We're looking at mental dominance. We're not looking at finding peace in a spiritual hereafter. We're not looking at immortal souls going to heaven. We're looking at mental dominance here and now, being true to the earth. We want to rule. We don't want to be slaves. And so in a ruling philosophy, we are looking at strategy and tactics. And that's why Nietzsche called Machiavelli perfection in politics. But we go beyond politics. We are looking to rule and to win combat in the philosophical realm of thought and expanding consciousness. We are looking towards the complete unification of mind and body in the Superman.